Ladies and gentlemen, as a courtesy to our speakers, flash photography is prohibited. Please turn off your cell phones and take your seats. Our program will begin in 5 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Our program will begin in 1 minute. Ladies and gentlemen, our program will now begin. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome founding editor of the Times of Israel, David Horowitz.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be back here with all of you in Washington. In recent months, we've witnessed a surge in anti-Israel and anti-Semitic activity across Europe and many other parts of the world. The attacks in Paris and Copenhagen shook the conscience of Jews everywhere and reinforced the importance of a sovereign homeland for the Jewish people. But while these trends present new challenges to the global Jewish community, Israel continues to receive critical support from key allies around the world. And this morning, we have the chance to hear from three of the most outspoken advocates for Israel on the world stage. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Global Leadership in Focus. Ladies and gentlemen, our first two guests have championed support for Israel in the international arena. The Honorable José María Aznar served as Prime Minister and President of Spain from 1996 to 2004. Throughout his career, thank you. Throughout his career, President Aznar has served as a strong advocate for the Jewish state. He's the founder of the Friends of Israel initiative, an international effort whose mission seeks to counter the attempts to delegitimize the state of Israel and its right to live in peace within safe and defensible borders. The former president is joined by the Honorable John Baird, Canada's former Minister of Foreign Affairs. Under Minister Baird's leadership, Canada consistently voted against anti-Israel resolutions at the United Nations and stood up time and time again as a reliable ally to the Jewish state. Just last year, Minister Baird said, quote, "Canada will not stand behind Israel at the United Nations, we will stand right beside it." Ladies and gentlemen, again, please welcome former Spanish President José María Aznar and former Canadian Foreign Minister John Baird. Thank you. Thank you both for being with us today and for your strong leadership over the years. Mr. Baird, let me start with you. And first, on behalf of everyone in the room, let me thank you for your remarkable leadership as Foreign Minister of Canada.
Thank you.
Thank you. You and the government of Prime Minister Stephen Harper have consistently been a steadfast ally of Israel. And you've said that Canada doesn't just go along in order to get along. So tell us more what you mean by this as it affects Israel.
Well, I think the pressure at virtually every international forum at the United Nations is just to go along with the crowd. It's a lot easier to sit down, to be quiet, and not to stand up for what you believe in. So it's not just important to have the right position when it comes to values and supporting Israel, but you've got to have the courage of your convictions to stand up, to speak out, and be counted when the going gets tough. Now, I was told this would be a tough crowd.
President Aznar, it's an honor to welcome you back to AIPAC.
Thank you.
And you spend a considerable amount of time traveling around the world as a statesman. What's your observation about the standing of Israel today in Europe and elsewhere?
Everywhere I go, I hear great words about Israel. Smart up nation, high-tech power, a land of opportunities. But unfortunately, doesn't work automatically when we're talking about politics. And there is a double standard that I reject totally. Because one thing is to criticize a single question of a single government or a single policy for the decision of a government. Another thing, very dangerous and wrong, that this is a mistake, is to criticize, to trying to delegitimize the state of Israel. Mm-hmm. We cannot accept this. This is very, very different, no? But anyway, there are, in some quarrels, there are people that thinking that appeasement is the better, that to escape the reality is better, or that fear to confront enemies is better. I believe that the reality is Israel is the only democracy that exists between Morocco and Afghanistan. Is the only Western world that exists in the Middle East. It's not a country in the Middle East. It's the only Western world that exists in the Middle East. And Israel needed no fear, no abasement, and confront the situation. They have good allies, good friends to support them in the present and in the future.
Thank you. Mr. Baird, you want to weigh in on that? Do you have a similar assessment?
You know, I think I was often asked, was my job as Canada's foreign minister? And simply put, the job was to promote Canadian values and to promote Canadian interests. And when it comes to Israel, those two intersect, because obviously it's in our interest to ensure the security, stability of the only liberal democracy in the region, and to stand up for the values that Canada, the United States, Spain, and Israel all share. Those are tremendously important. And the political correctness, the anti-Israel bias we see at so many international forums is just deeply disturbing, and we need to demonstrate that you can stand up and do the right thing, and that it doesn't consequentially affect your relationship with the rest of the Arab world. You know, Canada has probably the best relationship with the Arab world than we've had, certainly in my lifetime. And not every country will agree with our position when it comes to Israel, but I think they respect that we take a definitive position and aren't bullied.
Okay. Let me cut to a key issue that we're grappling with now. We have world powers in the middle of negotiations with Iran over its nuclear program. How worried are you that an agreement could be finalized which would be viewed by many as a bad deal?
Yeah, listen, we're deeply concerned about the direction that the government in Tehran is taking. I don't buy this PR job from the new president of Iran. Let's look at a few things. One, their human rights record has not only continued to be abysmal, in many respects it's actually deteriorated. Second, their material support for terrorism in just about every country in the region continues to go unabated. You look at their material support for Assad and the war he's waged against his own people. But finally, when it comes to the nuclear program, the last thing we need is a new nuclear arms race in the Middle East. And I can tell you the concern that I have is that we've gone so far from the United Nations Security Council resolutions, and that if Iran can maintain or be able to have a year breakout capacity, that this will see a new nuclear arms race. And I think we must do everything we can as a civilized world to stop that.
President Aznar, what are your thoughts on this issue?
Well, we know we're beginning the negotiations with Iran under the resolution of the United Nations on the will of the United States, trying to dismantle the infrastructure and trying to avoid that Iran became a nuclear power. Why? Because all of us consider that Iran is an existential threat for us, not only for Israel, but for us, for all of us. Now, we are negotiating that we recognize Iran as a nuclear power. We recognize that Iran can enrich uranium in significant capabilities, we recognize that Iran increasing the speed to enrich uranium in the future when and how the regime of Ayatollahs decided. In my view, the position of Israel is the same. Iran, the nuclear problem, continues to be an existential threat for us. If you change positions, please tell me the reason why you changed position. Because my position is the same. I must explain why I consider that a nuclear Iran is an existential threat. But the rest must to explain how it's possible to pass the position to reject this possibility, to accept that Iran become a nuclear power.
Minister, you want to weigh in on this? Yeah.
Two things. One, I used to view Iran's nuclear program almost exclusively through the lens of Israel. But over the past 4 years, I can tell you just about every single Arab country in the Middle East shares the exact same concern that we all share. And that's why it is so important that we work in partnership. And
the rise of nuclear arms.
Absolutely.
And
I want to tell a story. I was visiting Yad Vashem a number of years ago, and a rabbi was speaking, and he spoke very powerfully about the threat that Iran posed. And he reminded everyone in attendance that it was, I think on that date, it was 70 years to the date that Hitler became Chancellor of Germany. And when he became Chancellor of Germany, his opinion and his political views on the Jewish people were very well known. He had published Mein Kampf 11 years before. Well, when a regime undertakes a nuclear program, and they have been so crystal clear about their desire to wipe Israel off the face of the earth, we've got to take that incredibly seriously.
Can I just ask you something? Because I'm worried we won't get to this question otherwise. We've seen this rise of terrorism in Europe. Spain is no stranger to terrorist attacks against the public. How do you view the spate of terror attacks in Europe, and what does it say about Europe's future security picture?
We know very well terrorism, unfortunately, in Europe. Not only Europe, in Spain, with different historical roots, produced for the Marxist groups in the times of the Soviet Union, groups that trying to promote secessionist policies. But now jihadism is that they're trying to impose a way of life totally different of a way of life, a system of life, and trying to establish a Salafist vision of Quran extremely radical. The problem is the ground sympathy that in the Muslim population in Europe have the radical movements and the terrorists. And this complicity between population that live in Europe and terrorist group is very dangerous for Europe. They seek to neutralize European societies, extend fear, extend silence, and extend the neutrality to neutralize the capacity to react against terrorists. Reinforce our values and confront this threat is the responsibility of all the European and Western leaders.
A last question for you, Mr. Baird. What keeps you up at night when you think about Israel's future in the world today?
I am tremendously concerned, obviously, about Iran. It is, in my judgment, the biggest threat to international peace and security in the world. I'm tremendously concerned about radical, extremist, Islamic terrorists. I'm also concerned, frankly, though, about the growing anti-Israel sentiment around Europe. This is something that should cause us all a great concern, whether it's among the European people or increasingly among a lot of the European political leadership. I was deeply disappointed, for example, in the United Kingdom when there was a non-binding resolution on recognizing a Palestinian state around the peace process, around negotiations with Israel. And only 12 members of parliament had the courage to stand up and to do the right thing and to be counted. This has got to be a real concern, not just, frankly, for supporters of Israel in North America, but for the Jewish state and the supporters around the world.
Thank you. Thank you both for being here and for your admirable leadership on all these issues. Ladies and gentlemen, former President Jose Maria Aznar and former Minister John Baird. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, our next guest, ladies and gentlemen, is the first European head of state to address the AIPAC Policy Conference. He's a passionate ally of Israel, a public supporter of its defense against terror, and among the first to stand in solidarity against the rising tide of anti-Semitism. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the President of the Czech Republic, President Miloš Zeman. Mr. President, thank you. Thank you for being here. It's truly a great honor to be with you. Please.
Shalom. Mr. Horowitz, dear friends, Prime Minister Netanyahu said 1 year ago that the Czech Republic is the best friend of Israel all over the Europe. I am happy to meet the best friends of Israel in America. Well, sometimes it is important to remember the history, but I will be very short about the history. Let me remember only delivery of weapons and aircraft to Israel in 1948. And remember the Czech pilots who trained the pilots from Israel, and one of the pilots became the President of Israel, Mr. Weizmann. But now we face the future, and it is more important. There is growing wave of so-called international terrorism, but I always say Islamic terrorism. And that's why we need 2 steps in order to fight against this growing wave. The first phase is, of course, expression of solidarity. You know the famous slogan, Ich bin ein Berliner. Now we all must say, I am a Jew. Ani Yehudi.
Yes, sir.
But this is not enough. Of course, your discrimination is our discrimination. Your victims are our victims. But our society is too hedonistic, too consumption-oriented. And there is the cowardness and appeasement. Fine, we organize the demonstration and manifestation, but it is not enough. What I propose is the systematic and coordinated fight against the basis of Islamic terrorism. I was informed that cover organization is Muslim Brotherhood. The chief of Al-Qaeda is a member of Muslim Brotherhood. The chief of Taliban is a member of Muslim Brotherhood. And the same with Hamas, the same with Hezbollah, the same with al-Nusra, and so on and so on. So, what I propose is a coordinated action of international community, if possible, under the umbrella of Security Council, because superpowers have many, many conflicts, but one common enemy, Islamic terrorism. I wonder, Mr. Horowitz, whether you saw the map of the so-called Islamic Caliphate till the year 2020. So you may say that it is idea of a madman. You may be right. But Adolf Hitler has been also the madman, and he occupied practically all Europe. So, we need a new strategy in the fight against Islamic terrorism, not the massive occupation of territory. No tanks, no infantry, no artillery, but drones, rangers, and secret services. I met twice with the chief of Mossad, and I told him, it is not true that your secret service is most efficient one all over the world. It is true that it is the single efficient one, unfortunately. But at the end, I'd like to conclude my speech with remembrance of the past. The sentence I never forget till the end of my life. The sentence which was in the origin of the state, Jewish state of Israel, and the sentence we must accept just now if we are not willing to be the future victims of Islamic terrorism. Never again we shall go, we shall march like a sheep to the slaughter. Never again. Thank you.
Mr. President, I had a few questions for you, most of which you rendered redundant with your comments. I just want to ask you one short question. Why is it that your country has proven such solidarity with Israel? What is the source of this?
Very simple question and very simple answer, Mr. Horowitz. We have the same history with time lag of approximately 1 century. Well, we were surrounded by the enemies, by dictatorship. It was not only Hitler in Germany, it was Pilsudski in Poland, Horthy in Hungary, Dollfuss in Austria. And former Czechoslovakia has been the single island of democracy in Central Europe, the heart of Europe. And as Jose Maria said, you are the single island of democracy in the Middle East. And there must be the solidarity between those islands against the ocean of dictatorship.
Okay. Really, thank you. Thank you, President Zeman. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your steadfast support for the State of Israel. Thank you very much. Yeah, please.
One but two explosions near the finish line of the Boston Marathon.
St. Luke's School. Call is indicating she thinks there's someone shooting in the building.
From a law enforcement perspective, obviously our job has changed tremendously.
I come from a small county, but we have big problems just like any other community. We're not immune.
We don't have a terrorist problem in Western Kentucky. Hopefully we'll never experience that. But for one, I don't want to be the sheriff when something even remotely similar to that occurs, is not prepared for it because I chose to ignore the problem.
We've got to connect to today's reality, today's threat, and certainly ISI, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, IQ, all of these different offshoots, they want to hurt us everywhere they can, and that means here at home too. I look for innovations, I look for technology that can make our people and our community safer.
Israel is on the cutting edge from not only a technology but a tactical standpoint.
I wanted to go to Israel to see and learn from people that have dealt with some of these things, quite frankly, on a daily basis.
I am here in Israel with a number of other sheriffs from across the country, sharing in some experiences as it relates to Homeland Security, counterterrorism, and law enforcement.
We tested it. We put guys in the room.
Back at home, we have terrorism training. We have a bomb unit. Here, it's more for real. I mean, there's stuff going on here. The bomb unit the other day in Jerusalem, they're answering 20, 30 calls a shift, and those are legitimate calls. Failing's not an option. People die if they fail here.
There's been suicide bombers. There's rockets out of the Gaza Strip. We heard explosions on the Syrian border.
I mean, you can see it firsthand with people that actually deal with it each and every day.
They've had to become experts out of necessity, but they've done it well. Thankfully, they've been able to share with us so that we can make America a much safer country.
Coming back from Israel, one of the biggest things that I brought with me from a law enforcement perspective is the tactical mindset. Our need for through-the-wall radar was a very critical one. We've got to know where the threats are. We have to know how many bad guys there are. Camaro is a through-the-wall radar that was manufactured in Israel.
One standing by the door, moving by the back of the building.
Not only our SWAT team, but other SWAT teams in the country are using this technology, and it's definitely saved American lives.
Two guys holding one guy hostage.
I brought the Israeli expert here because I wanted to expose our folks to tangible information, tangible tactics that can help make our communities and our country safer.
Sheriff Bouchard asked me if I can come over and help this guy with hostage rescue training, help his team.
The main problem in that scenario was communication.
Experience that we have in Israel should be shared over here because terrorism is global.
First man through the door. This door.
You know, some of these issues that we're worried about are almost an everyday reality for many folks in Israel. And so to learn from somebody that lives, eats, and breathes that on an operational level has been amazing.
I really enjoyed the attitude and the spirit of the people.
But one of the most intriguing parts to me was, as aggressive as they have been in fighting terrorists, the restraint that they use. To me, that was amazing. And this is a balance that I think American law enforcement has to maintain.
And since I've been back, I've shared my experiences with really whoever will listen. I can tell you that my community as a whole now understands the benefit of their sheriff traveling to Israel.
I am so grateful that we have this relationship, and I will just hope and pray that we as Americans never ever forget the partnership of Israel, because we really do need each other.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Sheriffs Keith Kane, Thomas Hodgson, Ira Edwards, Vernon Stanforth, and Paul Pabu.
As a youngster growing up in Kentucky, my daddy used to always tell me that the very least that we could do to show our appreciation was to say thank you. So we're here today to do just exactly that. Thank you, AIPAC. And a tremendous thank to each and every one of you. You should know that the work that you do is truly helping to protect America and Israel, but indeed the entire free world. As law enforcement officers and first responders, keeping our communities a safe haven for our constituents is the very benchmark of our collective profession. Because of the trips you sponsor, we're better prepared to deal with the challenges of both today and tomorrow. There's no doubt in my mind, folks, that the people in all the counties represented on this stage are safer today because what we and others have learned on our trips to Israel. No, we are proud. We are proud to stand beside you in support of Israel and the vital role it plays in keeping us and the world safe and secure from all who would threaten to harm us. May God continue to bless each and every one of you. Thank you once again for allowing us to be with you in Washington. Know it has truly been our honor to be here.
The AIPAC Policy Conference has many traditions: politics, passion, and people. Lots and lots of people. One of AIPAC's most treasured traditions is our sense of community. A welcoming atmosphere that embraces our differences and celebrates our AIPAC family. AIPAC's Policy Conference gives all of us the chance to make new friends and strengthen existing relationships. So remember, continue the tradition. Be sure to treat all of our speakers and fellow delegates as guests in our home.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Esty and Lisa Hurt.
As twins, my sister and I share a lot, including a love for Israel and a desire to do our part to keep the Jewish state safe and strong.
Of course, our family has been part of all the important events in our lives, from preschool plays to our bat mitzvah to our high school graduation. So when we told them that AIPAC Policy Conference was among the most important events to us, they all agreed to come along and join us at this year's gathering.
Our parents and grandparents, our siblings, our aunt and uncle, and cousins too. 3 generations, 12 family members are here with us because the AIPAC Policy Conference is much more than politics. It's personal.
So from our family... Oh. They're over there. So from our family to yours, we invite you to sign up and join us next year when we hope to increase the size of our family delegation and welcome yours.
Register today and ensure tomorrow is better, brighter, safer, and stronger for all our families. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome AIPAC Chairman of the Board, Michael Kasson.
Before I introduce our speaker, let's give a round of applause for all the students who are here. Aren't they amazing? "3,000 students are here this year. And thanks to the generosity of the Adam and Gila Milstein Foundation, we are joined by more than 300 students from historically black colleges and universities, Christian-centered campuses, and Hispanic-serving institutions. To all of you, thank you for being here and for joining us on Capitol Hill tomorrow. Our community is stronger because of you. Our community also knows far too well how important it is to have a strong American voice at the United Nations to defend our allies and our values. For the past 2 years, Ambassador Samantha Power has been that voice. Working closely with her Israeli colleague, Ambassador Ron Prosor, Ambassador Power has helped repel one-sided, anti-Israel resolutions that are constant at the United Nations and, in particular, the UN Security Council. This past December, Ambassador Power worked tirelessly to defeat the Palestinian Authority's attempt to achieve statehood recognition through a resolution at the United Nations Security Council. In an era when much of the world has turned its back on the Jewish state, Ambassador Power has steadfastly defended our ally Israel. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the United States Permanent Representative to the United Nations, Ambassador Samantha Power.
Thank you all, and thank you, Michael. It's a great honor to be here. Before I begin, I want to thank Howard Corr for the invitation and to congratulate Lillian on her selection. I'd also like to give a shout out to Bob, who has done so much for this organization and for the U.S.-Israel partnership. In 1942, a 28-year-old Polish diplomat and Roman Catholic named Jan Karski disguised himself as a Jew, donning an armband with the Star of David, and smuggled himself through a tunnel into the Warsaw Ghetto. Later, posing as a militiaman, he infiltrated the Nazi death camp of Belzec and escaped carrying hundreds of documents on a miniature microfilm. Karski eventually made his way to London, where he showed the documents to Ignacy Schwarzbart, a Jew and representative of Poland's government in exile. Schwarzbart immediately sent the following cable to the World Jewish Congress in New York. Jews in Poland almost completely annihilated. Stop. Read reports. Deportation. 10,000 Jews for death. Stop. In Belzec, forced to dig their own grave. Mass suicide. Hundreds children thrown alive into gutters. Death camps in Belzec. Treblinka district. Malkinia, thousands dead. Not buried in Sobibor district. Voldavsky, mass graves. Murder, pregnant women, stop. Jews naked, dragged into death chambers. Gestapo men asked payment for quicker killing. Hunting fugitives, stop. Thousands daily victims throughout Poland, stop. Believe the unbelievable, stop. 6 years later, on May 14, 1948, David Ben-Gurion issued the declaration that created the State of Israel. For generations, Jews had dreamed of being a free nation in their own land, Eretz Israel, a vision articulated by Theodor Herzl in 1897 at the First Zionist Congress. But the Shoah gave this long-held dream what the declaration's authors called greater urgency. The savagery Karski witnessed was also a major impetus behind the creation of the institution where I currently represent the United States, the United Nations. I began my career as a journalist, moved by the harrowing images of prisoners in Serb concentration camps. I traveled to the Balkans, where I covered the horrors of a war in which kids were picked off their bicycles by snipers. Bosnian Muslim women were systematically raped, and some 8,000 unarmed men and boys were murdered in Srebrenica, the largest massacre in Europe since World War II. I also saw the citizens of Bosnia look in false hope to UN peacekeepers to protect them. In the end, they found rescue only from a US-led coalition that finally intervened to stop the slaughter. I was chilled by what I saw and chilled equally by the slowness of the world's response. I didn't understand how the world could say we had learned the lessons of the Holocaust and never again, only to witness Sarajevo, Srebrenica, the Rwandan genocide, and so much more. Those questions were the impetus behind my first trip to Israel nearly 2 decades ago. So much of what I saw there left an enduring impression, but nothing so much as the Children's Memorial at Yad Vashem. The descent into a dark underground cavern illuminated by a sea of projected yahrzeit candles paying tribute to the memory of 1.5 million children murdered by the Nazis. Projected in that darkness, a stream of photographs of the individual faces of the children who were killed, as their names, countries, and ages echo in the void, implanting themselves in one's consciousness and into one's conscience. You do not need to be Jewish to feel the searing loss held by that darkness. a loss like the tiny specks of light reflected in that cavernous room that is immeasurable, infinite. Of course, the story of the creation of Israel, and of the United Nations for that matter, is about much more than a reaction against the evils of the Holocaust. The story is also the story of thousands of years of Jews yearning for a homeland. And it is the story of a set of principles reflected in Israel's founding document, which envisaged a state, quote, based on freedom, justice, and peace, as envisaged by the prophets of Israel, end quote. A state that would, quote, be faithful to the principles of the Charter of the United Nations, end quote. So it is bitterly unjust that the United Nations, an institution founded upon the idea that all nations should be treated equally, is so often used cynically by member states to treat Israel unequally. These attacks on Israel's legitimacy are biased, they are ugly, and the United States of America will not rest until they stop. Now, as a few of you may have heard, the Prime Minister of Israel is in town. Rumor has it that he may be giving a couple speeches. You may also have heard lately of tension in the relationship between the United States and Israel. Let me today separate out a few different issues: politics, policy, and what the United States does each and every day to combat anti-Semitism around the world and to fight attacks against Israel at the United Nations. We believe firmly that Israel's security and the U.S.-Israel partnership transcends politics, and it always will. That is a very important statement you all have made. It was the same bond that led President Truman to make the United States the first country to recognize Israel 11 minutes after it declared its existence in 1948. And it is why we have stood by Israel's side every minute since. Our commitments to our partnership with Israel are bedrock commitments, rooted in shared fundamental values, cemented through decades of bipartisan reinforcement. This partnership should never be politicized, and it cannot and will not be tarnished or broken. Now, debating the most effective policy both within our respective democracies and among partners is more than useful. It is a necessary part of arriving at informed decisions. Politicizing that process is not. The stakes are too high for that. On policy, the negotiations that we and our partners have entered into with Iran, negotiations aimed centrally at denying Iran a nuclear weapon, have generated reasonable debate. My colleague and dear friend, National Security Advisor Susan Rice, will speak in depth about Iran later tonight. But I am struck that when I read about alleged policy differences on the Iran nuclear negotiations, I rarely see mention of the foundational strategic agreement between the United States and Israel, an agreement that undergirds our entire engagement with Iran. The United States of America will not allow Iran to obtain a nuclear weapon, period. Now, let me put President Obama's commitment to denying Iran a nuclear weapon in context. The Obama administration has invested more than $20 billion in foreign military financing for Israel, far more than for any other country and more than at any previous time in the history of the U.S.-Israel relationship. And the president not only committed to denying Iran a nuclear weapon before negotiations with Iran began, he has reiterated the same commitment during negotiations, and he will keep his commitment whether negotiations collapse or produce a diplomatic solution that meets our bottom lines. Maybe the president has made this point so often that it isn't heard in the same way anymore, but we have to keep repeating it. Talks, no talks. Agreement, no agreement. The United States will take whatever steps are necessary to protect our national security and that of our closest allies. We believe diplomacy is the preferred route to secure our shared aim, but if diplomacy should fail, we know the stakes of a nuclear-armed Iran, as well as everyone here. We will not let it happen. There will never be a sunset on America's commitment to Israel's security. Never. Now, let me turn to aspects of the U.S.-Israel partnership that get far less attention. What the United States is doing every day to combat anti-Semitism around the world and to have Israel's back at the United Nations. We are living in an era where anti-Semitism is surging by every measure. Reported harassment, polling data, violent attacks, and we should all be extremely disturbed by it. Last summer, we saw rallies about the Gaza violence in Dortmund and Frankfurt, at which protesters chanted, "Hamas, Hamas, Jews to the gas." And a similar rally in Paris where protesters marched on a synagogue chanting, "Jews to the oven." We see children who have to walk through phalanxes of heavily armed soldiers to get into their Jewish schools, and congregants forced to walk through metal detectors to enter their synagogues. And we have seen murder. The attack in Paris and the attacks before it on the Jewish school in Toulouse and the Jewish Museum in Brussels, last month's attack on a synagogue in Copenhagen. Then there are the signs we cannot see, but that are no less chilling. Jews thinking twice before shopping in a kosher shopping market, putting on a kippah, or hanging a mezuzah outside a home. In 2004, all 55 countries in the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, including the United States, convened in Berlin to make a historic pledge to combat all forms of anti-Semitism. When last November the countries reassembled to mark the 10th anniversary of that pledge, President Obama asked me to lead the presidential delegation to the meeting. What I told the leaders gathered there is what you already know. Anti-Semitic attacks are not only a threat to the Jewish community, they are a threat to European liberalism and pluralism, the very ideals that Jan Karski was willing to risk his life for. I told the European gathering that while freedom of expression is a sacred right, criticism of Israel can never be used as a justification for incitement to violence. And I told them that when leaders speak up, nations take notice. Unfortunately, President Obama was one of the few leaders to send a cabinet-level representative to this important and necessary conference. Even more alarming, only 2/3 of the countries that participated in the 2004 anti-Semitism conference were represented in 2014. Given that the situation has only gotten worse, I asked the European policymakers there, doesn't this issue at the very least merit the same show of solidarity and commitment from governments today as it did decades ago, a decade ago? We believe it demands that and more. We believe that as anti-Semitism rises, so too must our collective resolve to defeat it. That is why in recent years, the United States has been relentlessly pushing countries to take swift, robust steps to address it, from developing hate crimes legislation to prosecuting vigorously the perpetrators of anti-Semitic acts, to designating senior officials to coordinate efforts to combat anti-Semitism as the United States did back in 2004. Now, the last place you might expect meaningful action to combat anti-Semitism is at the United Nations. As you all know, it was 40 years ago, in 1975, that the UN General Assembly adopted a resolution with the support of 75 of the then 142 member states. That resolution officially determined that, quote, Zionism is a form of racism, end quote. When Daniel Patrick Moynihan, the US ambassador to the UN at the time, passionately objected to the resolution, he told the General Assembly, the abomination of anti-Semitism has been given the appearance of international sanction. What we have here is a lie. And it was precisely because of this lie and the fact that the General Assembly does not act fairly toward Israel that we worked over the last year with Israel, the European Union, Canada, and other nations to convene the first ever meeting on anti-Semitism in the very same UN General Assembly that gave us Zionism is racism. The late, great Moynihan would not have believed the scene in the General Assembly Hall on January 22nd this year, when more than 50 countries, including a good number that had voted for the 1975 resolution, and people of all faiths, took the podium not only to denounce anti-Semitism and attacks like the barbarous killings in Paris that had occurred on January 9th, but also to commit their countries to take concrete steps to stop its alarming rise. Going forward, all countries now need to be held to those pledges. Let me give you just a sampling of what we have done across the UN system to defend Israel and its right to be treated like any other nation. When 18 biased resolutions against Israel were proposed during the UN General Assembly last September, as they are every fall, we opposed every one of them. When the UN Human Rights Council held a special session last July to create a commission of inquiry to investigate alleged human rights violations committed in the context of military operations in the Palestinian territories, we cast the sole no vote on a profoundly flawed resolution that focused overwhelming criticism on Israel without once mentioning Hamas. Not once. And this after Hamas had fired approximately 4,000 rockets on Israel from Gaza last year. Before the United States joined the UN Human Rights Council in 2009, more than half of all the country-specific resolutions adopted there were focused on Israel. Today, we've helped lower that proportion to less than a third. But let me stress, the Human Rights Council has still adopted many more resolutions criticizing Israel than it has on North Korea, a totalitarian state in which roughly 100,000 people are currently being held in gulags and where children are forced to witness the execution of their parents. At the Security Council, we have also guarded vigilantly against any resolution that threatens Israel's security or undermines the pursuit of peace. That is why, in December, we opposed efforts to pass a deeply imbalanced Security Council resolution on Palestinian statehood and successfully rallied other countries to do the same. As I told the UN Security Council at the time, the United States recognizes, as do many Israeli leaders, that a two-state solution is vital to ensuring the preservation of a Jewish and democratic Israel. And we stand ready, as we always have, to support and engage with the parties in working toward that two-state solution. But progress toward that solution will require brave leadership and tough decisions. And as successive U.S. administrations have made clear for decades, Israeli settlement activity damages the prospects for peace. Nor will one-sided actions in international bodies or accession to international treaties, such as actions against Israel at the International Criminal Court, help us get to a negotiated solution. It is a false choice to tell Israel that it has to choose between peace on the one hand and security on the other. The United Nations would not ask any other country to make that choice, and it should not ask it of Israel. We have pressed the UN Security Council to respond when Israelis are victims of terror. For 7 years leading up to 2012, the Council would not even issue a single press statement condemning an attack on Israel. Last year, it issued 3, including one denouncing the sickening kidnapping and murder of the 3 Israeli teenagers, Naftali Frankel, Gilad Shaer, and Eyal Yifrak. Day in and day out, we fight for Israel's full and equal participation in UN bodies. While membership in these groups may sound bureaucratic, these are the organs where actual policies are hammered out. They matter. For years, Israel was the only UN member state that was excluded from a regional body at the UN in Geneva, and the only group that had no group to caucus with in New York in the General Assembly committee that addresses human rights. I was determined to change this, and we did. In January 2014, after a sustained full-court diplomatic press, we helped secure for Israel permanent membership in what's called the Western European and Others group, the group that we belong to. And in February 2014, we secured Israel's membership in the like-minded Human Rights Caucus from which it had long been excluded in New York. Now, no one will have to fight those battles again. Unfortunately, there are so many more battles. Confronting anti-Israel bias is part of a long bipartisan American tradition at the UN. It is part of the legacy of every single U.S. ambassador to the United Nations who's come before me, from my predecessor, Ambassador Rice, who fought tirelessly for Israel's equal treatment and helped put in place the toughest multilateral sanctions regime in history against Iran, back through master diplomats from both parties, from Moynihan to Kirkpatrick, Albright to Holbrooke. Why does the U.S. put so much into this effort? I would borrow the explanation that President Johnson gave shortly after the Six-Day War, when the Soviet premier asked him why the United States was supporting Israel, a nation so vastly outnumbered by neighboring countries with which it was at war. Johnson responded, quote, "Numbers do not determine what is right," end quote. That was true for America's support for Israel in 1967, and it is true for America's support for Israel today. And the reason it is right, as Johnson said, is because we believe in Israel. We believe in the values of pluralism, freedom, and democracy that it represents. And we believe that the Jewish people should always have a homeland that is safe and secure. But there's another reason. There's another reason we put so much into ensuring Israel gets the seat it deserves at every table and can take part in responding to the great challenges of our time. Given the equal opportunity to contribute, Israel has shown time and again how much it has to offer the world. Consider Israel's participation in the UN's responses to global humanitarian crises like the recent Ebola outbreak, a cause to which Israel contributed one of the highest per capita amounts of money and resources, at the same time as it delivered mobile Ebola treatment units to the affected countries. Or think about its rapid deployment following the devastating earthquake in Haiti in 2010, of an entire field hospital together with 200 personnel, which it deployed with the help of the United States within 4 days of the earthquake. If those are not modern day embodiments of tikkun olam, I don't know what is. There is a broader reason that why we fight relentlessly for Israel to be treated equally at the UN, and that is to bring the UN closer to meeting the goals of its charter. As everything I've said up to this point should make clear, I'm under no illusions about the flaws and contradictions within the UN. But we do not have the option of walking away. Whether bringing countries together to expand the global coalition confronting ISIL, or enabling peacekeeping missions to stop atrocities, the UN can help advance America's and Israel's shared interests. The problems we see at the UN, including anti-Israel bias, do not exist because of the UN organization per se. The UN is the venue where various countries' biases are aired. We will never accept this, ever. But we cannot kid ourselves into thinking that giving up on the UN will cure this problem. Instead, we must commit ourselves to forging through our principles, our arguments, and our sweat, the world that we seek. That is what Ambassador Moynihan saw so clearly in 1975 when he told the UN, as it prepared to pass that infamous resolution, quote, "What we have at stake here is not merely the honor and the legitimacy of the State of Israel, although a challenge to the legitimacy of any member nation ought always to arouse the vigilance of all members of the United Nations. For a yet more important matter," he said, "is at issue, which is the integrity of the whole body of moral and legal precepts which we know as human rights," end quote. Those stakes have not changed. And if we are to confront today's threats, whether they stem from terrorist fighters or deadly diseases, from totalitarian governments or crushing poverty, we need more countries that share our commitments and values so we can make the world more just and more secure. Let me conclude. For Israel, too often the right to be treated equally, and at times even the right to exist at all, has been challenged. Israel's history, in part, is the story of perpetually overcoming these challenges. It is a story that is still being written as the obstacles persist in so many forms, from virulent anti-Semitism around the world to the terrorists and regimes that continue to threaten Israel. And throughout this shared history, the United States has stood shoulder to shoulder with our partner through thick and thin. Several decades ago, when, like today, some were citing tension in the ties between the United States and Israel, a wise senator from Massachusetts said, quote, "It is worth remembering that Israel is a cause that stands beyond the ordinary changes and chances of American public life. In our pluralistic society, it has not been a Jewish cause any more than Irish independence was solely the concern of Americans of Irish descent. The ideals of Zionism," he went on, "have, in the last half-century, been repeatedly endorsed by presidents and members of Congress from both parties. Friendship for Israel is not a partisan matter," he said, "it is a national commitment," end quote. That year was 1960. The senator was John F. Kennedy, but his words hold true today. The bond between the United States and Israel is still a national commitment. It should never be a partisan matter. The bond runs much deeper than any one issue or any one generation. Now, as then, we cannot and we will not lose sight of that. Thank you so much. Thank you.
It's a light in the darkness, a flame that turns metal into a symbol of hope. Steel is cold, dark, and permanent, but I have learned how to change it. My name is Yaron Bob, and I'm a metal artist. My home is in Moshav Yated, a small town just steps from Gaza and Egypt. A few years ago, a siren went off, as it often does. Tseva Adom, Tseva Adom. In my community, it's mean 10 to 15 seconds to run for shelter. On that day, there was nowhere to run. No safety, no cover. And so I leaned against the wall and I prayed. The rocket exploded just on the other side of the wall. That all that stood between me and death, one wall. Everyone was safe, but we were shaken. We are often shaken. When the police came to pick up the rocket, something made me ask if I could keep it. I brought it home. I stared at it for a long time. At first, I was afraid of what it meant. It sat in my studio, an unwelcome guest, smiling, grinning, staring at me. I wanted to take away its power. I wanted to stop being afraid. I wanted those who sent it toward Israel with hatred in their hearts to be forced to see the beauty in the world. Tearing apart the rockets is my therapy. It gives me peace. I cut them into rings. I burn the rocket in a furnace that I like to think cleans the metal of the hatred that created. Finally, I hammer them down. I flatten each piece until it's thin. And then I use the torch. The flame brings the metal to life. Each twist revealing a new petal, slowly softening them, wrapping the metal to create each bloom. I knew what I chose to create needed to speak of life and rebirth. To me, a rose means warmth and family. It means home. Each rose marked with the month and the year when the rocket landed. I hope that I'm making the world a better place. Part of my proceeds go to help the victim of terror. I hope that my work helps people to see that Israel hungers for peace, not war. I hope that someday we and the people of Gaza find a way to live without weapons, without death. My sculptures are my statement. What they throw at us, I will make into something beautiful. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome AIPAC President Bob Cohen.
We are honored this morning to be joined by the Prime Minister of the State of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. Throughout his distinguished career, Prime Minister Netanyahu has confronted the challenges facing the Jewish state with courage and passion. He has warned the world about the threat of militant Islam, fought against anti-Israel campaigns at the United Nations, and long recognized the danger of a nuclear-capable Iran, not just to Israel, but to the entire world. Mr. Prime Minister, today, with so much at stake, America's pro-Israel community, including more than 16,000 people in this room, welcomes you to Washington. We are thrilled that you've brought family with you from Jerusalem. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the wife of Israel's Prime Minister, Mrs. Sarah Netanyahu. We welcome you both to this conference in celebration of the shared interests and values of two great democracies. And we stand here to send a clear message. We stand with the people of Israel in their quest to stop Iran. We stand with the people of Israel in their quest for lasting peace with their neighbors. And we stand with the people of Israel in their quest for a brighter future. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the Prime Minister of the State of Israel, Mr. Benjamin Netanyahu.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. תודה רבה. Thank you. Wow. 16,000 people. Anyone here from California? Florida? New York? Well, these are the easy ones. How about Colorado? Indiana? I think I got it. Montana? Texas? You're here in record numbers. You're here from coast to coast, from every part of this great land, and you're here at a critical time. You're here to tell the world that reports of the demise of the Israeli-U.S. relations is not only premature, they're just wrong. You're here to tell the world that our alliance is stronger than ever. And because of you, and millions like you across this great country, it's going to get even stronger in the coming years. Thank you, Bob Cohen, Michael Kasson, Howard Corr, and all the leadership of AIPAC. Thank you for your tireless, dedicated work to strengthen the partnership between Israel and the United States. I want to thank, most especially, members of Congress, Democrats and Republicans. I deeply appreciate your steadfast support for Israel year in, year out. You have our boundless gratitude. I want to welcome President Zeman of the Czech Republic, Mr. President, Israel never forgets its friends, and the Czech people have always been steadfast friends of Israel, the Jewish people. From the days of Thomas Masaryk at the inception of Zionism, you know, Mr. President, when I entered the Israeli army in 1967, I received a Czech rifle, that was one of the rifles that was given to us by your people in our time of need in 1948. So thank you for being here today. Also here are two great friends of Israel. Former Prime Minister of Spain, José María Aznar, and as of last month, former Canadian Foreign Minister John Baird. Thank you both for your unwavering support. You are true champions of Israel, and you are true champions of the truth. I also want to recognize U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Dan Shapiro, for your genuine friendship, Dan, and for the great job you're doing representing the United States and the State of Israel. And I want to recognize the two Rons. I want to thank Ambassador Ron Prosor for the exemplary job he's doing at the UN in a very difficult forum. Thank you. And I want to recognize the other Ron, a man who knows how to take the heat, Israel's ambassador to the United States, Ron Dermer. Ron, I couldn't be prouder to have you representing Israel in Washington. And finally, I want to recognize my wife, Sarah, whose courage in the face of adversity is an inspiration to me. Sarah divides her time as a child psychologist, as a loving mother, and her public duties as the wife of the Prime Minister. Sarah, I'm so proud to have you here with me today, to have you with me at my side always. My friends, I bring greetings to you from Jerusalem, our eternal, undivided capital. And I also bring to you news that you may not have heard. You see, I'll be speaking in Congress tomorrow. You know, never has so much been written about a speech that hasn't been given. And I'm not going to speak today about the content of that speech, but I do want to say a few words about the purpose of that speech. First, let me clarify what is not the purpose of that speech. My speech is not intended to show any disrespect to President Obama or the esteemed office that he holds. I have great respect for both. I deeply appreciate all that President Obama has done for Israel: security cooperation, intelligence sharing, supported the UN, and much more. Some things that I, as Prime Minister of Israel, cannot even divulge to you because it remains in the realm of the confidences that are kept between an American president and an Israeli Prime Minister. I am deeply grateful for this support, and so should you be. My speech is also not intended to inject Israel into the American partisan debate. An important reason why our alliance has grown stronger, decade after decade, is that it has been championed by both parties, and so it must remain. Both Democratic and Republican presidents have worked together with friends from both sides of the aisle in Congress to strengthen Israel and our alliance between our two countries. And working together, they've provided Israel with generous military assistance and missile defense spending. We've seen how important that is just last summer. Working together, they've made Israel the first free trade partner of America 30 years ago and its first official strategic partner last year. They've backed Israel in defending itself at war and in our efforts to achieve a durable peace with our neighbors. Working together has made Israel stronger. Working together has made our alliance stronger. And that's why the last thing that anyone who cares about Israel, the last thing that I would want, is for Israel to become a partisan issue. And I regret that some people have misperceived my visit here this week as doing that. Israel has always been a bipartisan issue. Israel should always remain a bipartisan issue. Ladies and gentlemen, the purpose of my address to Congress tomorrow is to speak up about a potential deal with Iran that could threaten the survival of Israel. Iran is the foremost state sponsor of terrorism in the world. Look at that graph. Look at that map that you see on the wall. It shows Iran training, arming, dispatching terrorists on 5 continents. Iran envelops the entire world with its tentacles of terror. This is what Iran is doing now without nuclear weapons. Imagine what Iran would do with nuclear weapons. And this same Iran vows to annihilate Israel. If it develops nuclear weapons, it would have the means to achieve that goal. We must not let that happen. And as Prime Minister of Israel, I have a moral obligation to speak up in the face of these dangers while there's still time to avert them. For 2,000 years, my people, the Jewish people, were stateless, defenseless, voiceless, we were utterly powerless against our enemies who swore to destroy us. We suffered relentless persecution and horrific attacks. We could never speak in our own behalf, and we could not defend ourselves. Well, no more. No more. The days when the Jewish people are passive in the face of threats to annihilate us, those days are over. Today, in our sovereign state of Israel, we defend ourselves. And being able to defend ourselves, we ally with others, most importantly, the United States of America, to defend our common civilization against common threats. In our part of the world, and increasingly in every part of the world, no one makes alliances with the weak. You seek out those who have strength, those who have resolve, those who have determination to fight for themselves. That's how alliances are formed. So we defend ourselves, and in so doing, create the basis of a broader alliance. And today, we are no longer silent. Today, we have a voice. And tomorrow, as Prime Minister of the one and only Jewish state, I plan to use that voice. I plan to speak about an Iranian regime that is threatening to destroy Israel, that's devouring country after country in the Middle East, that's exporting terror throughout the world, and that is developing, as we speak, the capacity to make nuclear weapons, lots of them. Ladies and gentlemen, Israel and the United States agree that Iran should not have nuclear weapons. But we disagree on the best way to prevent Iran from developing those weapons. Now, disagreements among allies are only natural from time to time, even among the closest of allies, because there are important differences between America and Israel. The United States of America is a large country, one of the largest. Israel is a small country, one of the smallest. America lives in one of the world's safest neighborhoods. Israel lives in the world's most dangerous neighborhood. America is the strongest power in the world. Israel is strong, but it's much more vulnerable. American leaders worry about the security of their country. Israeli leaders worry about the survival of their country. You know, I think that encapsulates the difference. I've been Prime Minister of Israel for 9 years. There's not a single day, not one day, that I didn't think about the survival of my country and the actions that I take to ensure that survival. Not one day. And because of these differences, America and Israel have had some serious disagreements over the course of our nearly 70-year-old friendship. That started with the beginning. In 1948, Secretary of State George Marshall opposed David Ben-Gurion's intention to declare statehood. That's an understatement. He vehemently opposed it. But Ben-Gurion, understanding what was at stake, went ahead and declared Israel's independence. In 1967, as an Arab noose was tightening around Israel's neck, the United States warned Prime Minister Levi Eshkol that if Israel acted alone, it would be alone. But Israel did acted alone to defend itself. In 1981, under the leadership of Prime Minister Menachem Begin, Israel destroyed the nuclear reactor at Osirak. The United States criticized Israel and suspended arms transfers for 3 months. And in 2002, after the worst wave of Palestinian terror attacks in Israel's history, Prime Minister Sharon launched Operation Defensive Shield. The United States demanded that Israel withdraw its troops immediately, but Sharon continued until the operation was completed. There's a reason I mention all these. I mention them to make a point. Despite occasional disagreements, the friendship between America and Israel grew stronger and stronger, decade after decade. And our friendship will weather the current disagreement as well to grow even stronger in the future. And I'll tell you why. Because we share the same dreams, because we pray and hope and aspire for that same better world, because the values that unite us are much stronger than the differences that divide us. Values like liberty, equality, justice, tolerance, compassion. As our region descends into medieval barbarism, Israel is the one that upholds these values common to us and to you. As Assad drops barrel bombs on his own people, Israeli doctors treat his victims in our hospitals right across the fence in the Golan Heights. As Christians in the Middle East are beheaded and their ancient communities are decimated, Israel's Christian community is growing and thriving, the only one such community in the Middle East. As women in the region are repressed, enslaved, and raped, women in Israel serve as chief justices, CEOs, fighter pilots. 2 women chief justices in a row. Well, not in a row, but in succession. That's pretty good. In a dark and savage and desperate Middle East, Israel is a beacon of humanity, of light, and of hope. Ladies and gentlemen, Israel and the United States will continue to stand together because America and Israel are more than friends. We're like a family. We're practically mishpucha. Now, disagreements in the family are always uncomfortable, but we must always remember that we are family. Rooted in a common heritage, upholding common values, sharing a common destiny. And that's the message I came to tell you today. Our alliance is sound, our friendship is strong, and with your efforts, it will get even stronger in the years to come. Thank you, AIPAC. Thank you, America. God bless you all.
Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our morning program. Please check your personal schedule for your next event and enjoy your day.